get-go.
Just want to start today with a trigger warning disclaimer. This podcast contains descriptions of death and drowning. Hi, I'm Katie Carpenter.
I'm Terry Kovanitz.
We apologize for any and all mistakes today as we begin this episode of Titanic Transcripts.
Okay, we're going to finish up Mr. Franklin's interview. Mr. Franklin, can you obtain for the committee the plans and specifications for the construction of this ship?
I can obtain whatever the Oceanic Steam Navigation Company, the owners of the ship, had. These steamers are built by Messrs. Harland and Wolff on a commission basis, but their specifications on that are drawn in the great detail that ordinarily applies in steamers constructed under contract.
Will you, through your officers of your company in England, endeavor to obtain from Harland and Wolff the plans and specifications that were followed in the construction of this ship?
We will, sir.
You speak of the percentage basis?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
They charge us for each steamer at cost, plus a certain percentage for commission to them.
That is, you adopt the plan and authorize the construction of the ship, holding yourselves responsible for its entire cost, plus the profit or percentage which goes to the builders over and above its actual cost?
That is quite right. Of course, they give us an estimate, as I understand it. They give the company ordering the ship an estimate of about what the cost is going to be.
Do you have an engineer of your own who supervises this work?
That is all done abroad and controlled by the company directly owning the steamer, who no doubt have the engineer.
Who was Mr. Anderson that perished on the Titanic?
I do not know any Mr. Anderson.
I'm Andrews.
Oh, Mr. Thomas Andrews was one of the most prominent men in the employ of Messrs. Harland and Wolff, who constructed the Titanic.
He was their representative aboard this ship?
He was their representative aboard this ship.
On the trial trip?
On the maiden voyage, I would say.
The maiden voyage?
The maiden voyage.
And I assume during the trial tests?
That I do not know, but I assume so. I do not know.
I think someone testified to that fact the other day.
I do not know.
Are the steamers classed in any of the accepted classification societies?
They are far in excess of any classification societies. They could be classified at any time. Whenever it has been necessary to class any of them, it has been done without any difficulty.
Do you carry insurance on the steamers?
Yes, sir.
By whom are your steamers designed?
These questions that you are asking me about who designed the steamer, etc., I want you to fully understand that does not come under my jurisdiction at all.
I understand. I am seeking such information as you have.
My information, from what I have seen myself, is that the steamers are really designed by Messrs. Harland and Wolff's people and submitted to Ismay and the company, and gone over carefully with them constantly, not only at the time of designing, but during the course of construction. They are given the utmost care and consideration from every point of view.
And what was the cost of this ship to your company?
In round numbers, she costs $1,500,000.
You do not mean 1 million.
Oh, yes, I'm giving the amount in pounds.
Oh, in pounds?
Yes.
1,500,000 and some odd thousand pounds. Is that correct?
Yes, and equipped.
That includes all its equipment of every kind and character?
Yes, sir.
If you know, will you tell the committee its tonnage capacity?
I could not tell you its tonnage capacity. Its gross tonnage was about 45,000 tons.
Was that the largest ship ever built by your company?
Yes, sir. This ship was of nearly 46,000 tons.
What is the next in point of tonnage?
The Olympic, which is near 45,000 tons.
In addition to the plans and specifications which I have asked for, I think it desirable for the committee to know the stability data in loaded condition and in light condition and in damaged condition of the Titanic. Can you obtain this information?
I can try to get it from Messrs. Harland and Wolff.
Of your own knowledge, can you answer that?
No, sir, I could not do it. I can give you the gross tonnage now, exactly, if you desire it.
Please do so.
46,328 tons. Net registered tonnage, 21,831.
And how many passengers would this ship accommodate under your plan of operations safely?
In round numbers, I would say for the first, second, and third classes, about 2,200 or 2,300 passengers.
How many in the first class?
I was referring to the Olympic there, Senator, by mistake. Excuse me. I would make that about 2,500 passengers for the Titanic.
One moment, then. Does the figure you mentioned give the passenger capacity of the Olympic?
Yes, sir. That gives the passenger capacity of the Olympic.
Give us the passenger capacity of the Titanic?
I could not give you that myself. I would say about 750 first, as you would load your passengers. If you had every berth occupied, she would carry more, but as you would load her, about 750 first class, about 500 second class, and about 1,100 third class, or 1,200 third class. It would depend entirely on the way you sell your rooms in the first and second class.
Will you, for the information of this committee, tell us how the distinction is made in accommodations?
The distinction is made, in the first place, down below in the house. There are partitions or doors in the companionways.
And what is that called?
How do you mean? They are called bulkheads with doors.
Yes.
Then, at certain places on the upper decks...
Are there any berths down there?
Yes, I'm speaking of the places down below decks where the cabins are.
Exactly.
Then, on the upper decks, the space may be separated by a railing, or in some ships by well decks, which separate the houses.
Yes.
That is the only thing. The whole equipment is entirely different. There are different accommodations, you know.
Well, what is the difference in cost of transportation from Southampton to New York, if any, in those various classes?
They all vary. Ships are rated. Each ship is rated with a minimum rate in the first and second class.
I refer particularly to the Titanic.
All right, sir. You want to compare the Titanic to what ship?
I do not want to compare it to any ship. I would like to know if you can tell me what it costs a passenger to come from Southampton to New York, first class, second class, and third class.
That is what I'm trying to get at.
By the Titanic.
In the case of the Titanic, the lowest rate at which the Titanic would carry a first-class passenger was $125. That was the minimum rate.
And what does that include?
That includes everything. It includes a berth, in with one or two other people, or something of that sort. Not a room for a man to himself.
And it includes meals also?
Also meals, everything. It includes everything. It's all-inclusive.
And service?
And service. It includes everything. As far as the second-class passenger rate is concerned, I think it was $66 on the same basis, and including everything. The third-class rate was about $40.
And what about steerage?
That is what I say. The third-class or steerage rate was about $40. It varies.
And I should also like to ask about their accommodations. Can you describe them?
They are separated in the same way, either below a deck or they are separated by a bulkhead with doors in it. And then when you get to the upper deck, they have certain spaces on the ship which are separated by rails.
Did you ever see the Titanic?
Never. I have never been aboard her.
You have accurate descriptions of her, I suppose.
I have seen photographs of her and so on.
I suppose your office had been fully advised as to her general character?
Yes, but of course we had not been so fully advised about the Titanic because we already had the Olympic, and the Titanic was practically a sister ship of the Olympic.
I think I understood you to say that you did not receive any wireless messages from the Carpathia at all until Captain Rostron's message to the Cunard line?
In this way. We called up several times. We called the Navy Department at Newport and asked them if they could not ask the captain of the Carpathia by wireless through the Navy steamer that was going out there, the Salem, to try to get us some further information about the third class and the crew aboard the Carpathia, to get their names.
Is this Newport office a postal office of the Marconi Company?
No, sir. It is a United States torpedo station, as I understand it.
And you appealed through that station?
We telephoned, yes, 3 or 4 times.
Did you receive any results?
My recollection is that we got telephone replies to 1 or 2 of those messages, that the captains had reported that they had done everything they could. I will read you one now. Message delivered to Carpathia through Chester. Chester answers that complete list of freight and second-class passengers and crew sent ashore by Carpathia. Chester states will send a list of first-class passengers when received from Carpathia. Chester in communication with Carpathia. And that is signed Torpedo Station and addressed White Star Line, New York. It is from Newport, April 17th, 1912.
I would like to have that marked for identification.
Here is another, addressed White Star Line from Newport, Rhode Island, April 17th, reading. White Star Line, New York City. Chester reports in communication with Carpathia repeatedly. Ask Carpathia for list of third-class passengers. Request not complied with. We'll try again. Carpathia in communication with shore stations. And it is signed Torpedo Station. That was received April 17th. Our whole anxiety at the time was to try to get the names of the people.
Do you know anything about an attempt on the part of the President of the United States to get into communication with the Carpathia?
I do not, sir. We had some telegrams from the President regarding Major Butt, and we answered them as promptly as we could. That is all.
I would like this record to show whether yourself or any other officer of your company at any time before the landing of the Carpathia received any message from any person asking that the Cedric should be held in New York until the arrival of the Carpathia.
Yes, sir.
From whom?
Here's a telegram. Steamship Carpathia, April 17th, 1912.
What is the hour?
5:35 p.m. is stamped on here. It reads, Most desirable Titanic crew aboard Carpathia should be returned home earliest moment possible. Suggest you hold Cedric, sailing her daylight Friday unless you see any reason contrary. Propose returning in her myself. Please send outfit of clothes, including shoes, for me to Cedric. Have nothing of my own. Please reply. Yamsi. One word in this telegram reads and I have read it as any because there is no doubt that is what it was. It was underscored when it was handed to me, showing that it was evidently a mistake.
Whose code or cipher signature is that?
That is Mr. Ismay's signature or cipher.
Was any reply made to that?
To Ismay, Carpathia, April 17th, 1912, 8 p.m. We sent it.
What date was that?
April 17th. That is in reply to this other one.
That was Wednesday?
That was Wednesday evening. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Ismay, Carpathia. Have arranged forward crew Lapland, sailing Saturday, calling Plymouth. We all consider most unwise delay Cedric, considering all circumstances.
And who sent that?
It is signed Franklin.
Did you get any reply to that?
I think the best way is just to read all these telegrams as they come.
I wish you would.
Well, they are a little mixed up.
I want that story in the record.
The best way to do that is to read all these telegrams as they come here and not say which is the reply.
All right. Just proceed, keeping in mind that we want the date and the person to whom and from whom the telegraph was sent and the signature.
I will.
Give them in chronological order, if possible.
I'm a little doubtful about that, but to the best of our knowledge and belief, they are in order. That is my understanding of it. It is not the word we usually send over here. This telegram is addressed to the steamship Carpathia, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, April 18th, addressed to Isle Frank, New York. Please join Carpathia quarantine if possible. Yamsi, 3:35 a.m. Steamship Carpathia via Seaconnessets, Massachusetts. Isle Frank, New York. Very important, you should hold Cedric daylight Friday for Titanic crew. Reply. Yamsi, 8 a.m. Steamship Carpathia, New York. Isle Frank, New York. Very important, you should hold Cedric daylight Friday for Titanic crew. Answer. Yamsi. Steamship Carpathia via Seaconnessets, Massachusetts. Isle Frank, New York. Think most unwise, keep crew Titanic until Saturday. Strongly urge detain Cedric, sailing her midnight if desirable. Yamsi. That is April 18th. All of these are April 18th.
That was Thursday the 18th.
Yes, sir. And these are just the two figures there, 18 after that. It doesn't say anything else. It reads, Steamship Carpathia via Seaconnessets, Massachusetts, Isle Frank, New York. Unless you have good and substantial reason for not holding Cedric, please arrange to do so. Most undesirable to have crew in New York for so long. No signature.
And to whom was that addressed?
That is addressed in the usual way, Isle Frank, New York. Then there's this telegram, Ismay, Carpathia. Regret after fullest consideration, decided Cedric must sail as scheduled. Expect join Carpathia at quarantine but cannot remove boats as everything arranged for steamer proceed dock immediately. Signed, Franklin. And that is all on that subject, sir.
Please hand those to the stenographer. In routine telegrams, do you address Mr. Ismay as Yamsi?
We never use, between here and Liverpool, or when Mr. Ismay is abroad, the word Yamsi at all. It is a word used in England and abroad. We have knowledge that that is his address used frequently in England, but not over here.
Have you instructions as to the use of Yamsi or Ismay?
I never use the word Yamsi.
But have you instructions in regard to that matter?
I have no instructions.
I understood you to say that the Cedric departed in accordance with the last telegram that you sent to the Carpathia before the arrival of the Carpathia?
The Cedric departed at noon on Thursday.
After the Carpathia arrived on the dock in New York when?
At about 9:30 p.m. on Thursday.
Didn't Mr. Ismay ask you to make other arrangements for his immediate departure for England?
I had no communication from Mr. Ismay about his departure for England, except the communications that I have read off to you here. Mr. Ismay never mentioned his personal departure, except in the first telegram and the telegram in which he asked us to convey to Mrs. Ismay. He left the departure of himself entirely to us. The question of his departure, as I understood it, his personal departure was left to us.
And what did you determine about it?
We determined it would be a very unfortunate thing to attempt to hold the Cedric and hurry the crew on board, or agree to Mr. Ismay's sailing under the present circumstances, with which Mr. Ismay, as we knew, was not in any way familiar. We were here, and we were hearing the criticism. We knew what was being said, but Mr. Ismay had no knowledge or information regarding that. We realized the necessity of getting the crew off, which was just what we wanted done in every other case of the kind, and what every ship owner would do.
When did you first know of the official investigation that was proposed?
I first knew of the official investigation, I will say, I think it would have been about 2 o'clock on Thursday. I could not exactly fix the time, but I think it would have been about 2 o'clock on Thursday.
Did you communicate that back to your company?
I do not think I did. I may have by cable that night to Liverpool after it was all over.
That is what I meant.
Oh, yes, sir.
Did you communicate to your company the purpose to make an official inquiry?
I may have to Liverpool that night. I think I did.
And did you communicate that fact to Mr. Ismay?
After I got on the Carpathia.
Mr. Franklin, Senator Perkins desires to ask you a few questions. I want to ask you whether you had the Titanic constructed under the British Lloyd's and the Bureau Veritas.
I am sure she was not constructed under the Bureau Veritas, and I do not think she was constructed under Lloyd's.
Was she entitled to subvention from the government?
Yes.
She was constructed under the direction of a naval officer, then?
Not necessarily. In my opinion, it is a matter...
If she were entitled to subvention, it would be necessary for her to be constructed in accordance with the rules and regulations of the Navy Department, as I understand it.
There is some requirement of that kind, but I cannot give you information regarding that.
As to her equipment?
As to her equipment, it had to be in accordance with the Board of Trade rules.
In other words, in accordance with British law.
Yes, and her equipment was in excess of those requirements.
She was fully equipped in accordance with the requirements of the British Board of Trade.
She was equipped in excess of the requirements of the law of the British Board of Trade.
And that is based upon the British law, of course.
That is based upon the British law, of course.
In regard to this matter of a government subvention, you say you have no knowledge of her having been built under the direction of the Navy Department?
I have no knowledge as to what the requirements of the Navy Department are in connection with the subvention. There is some provision, I believe, in regard to the strengthening of the ship.
All merchant ships are required to be constructed under the requirement of the British Lloyd's.
No, sir.
In order to get a rating, they are obliged to in this country.
Not the British Lloyd's in this country.
The American Lloyd's?
Not necessarily.
They have to do it to get the advantage of the subsidy, do they not?
That policy is pursued under the British Lloyd's in regards to the construction, very largely by people having tramp steamers and other steamers of that type. But when you get down to this more expensive and better type of steamers, they are so far in excess of any regulation that there is nothing to be accomplished by having that done. But they can always be put under these regulations if you want them to be. As far as the Board of Trade is concerned, in regard to the protection for life, no ship can sail from England without the Board of Trade certificate. That is the law of England.
They cannot be cleared from the custom house without the certificate?
No, sir. They would not be allowed to carry any passengers unless they had the Board of Trade certificate.
And entered in the custom house, of course.
Yes, and nailed in a prominent place on the steamer.
That is all.
I would like to get it clearly before you that the Board of Trade Certificate, which is the law of England, is entirely different from the classification under Lloyd's, which is purely the commercial problem. The one is law, the other is purely a business matter.
One is a set of rules and regulations.
The Board of Trade rules and regulations, that is the law. The ship was in excess of the requirements of the law in every particular at that time.
Is the White Star a British company?
The Oceanic Steam Navigation Company...
I am speaking of the White Star Line itself. Is the White Star Line a corporation?
It is a trade name, yes, sir.
It is just a trade name?
Yes, sir.
The company is the Oceanic Steam Navigation Company?
Yes.
Owner of the White Star Line?
Right.
A British company?
Right.
And the stock is held there?
Yes, sir.
The International Mercantile Marine Company is interested in that stock, is it?
They are the holding company.
Through the subsidiary companies is the ownership of the Oceanic Steam Navigation Company in the International Mercantile Marine.
The Oceanic Steam Navigation Company is the managing company, the controlling company, the owning company of the White Star Line. That is the trade name under which the steamers run as a trade name. The stock of the Oceanic Steam Navigation Company is owned by the International Navigation Company of England of Liverpool.
And the stock of the company is owned by whom?
It is controlled and owned by the IMM Company through the bondholders.
That is through the International Mercantile Marine Company?
The International Mercantile Marine Company of New Jersey.
That is an American company?
That is an American company.
Is the management of the International Mercantile Marine Company dictated from the United States or from the Liverpool office?
The policy, the management, from that point of view, it is dictated by the president, Mr. Ismay, whose headquarters are in Liverpool.
That is the practical management.
The practical management, yes.
The general management or the general policy would be dictated by the International Mercantile Marine Company in New York, would it not, from their office?
All of the questions regarding operation or management of the company are left to Mr. Ismay, the president.
That is the practical management.
Yes.
If you were going to increase the stock holdings, if you were going to invest several $1 million in new ships, you would decide it in New York, would you not?
If we were going to invest several $1 million in new ships, Mr. Ismay
would make his recommendation.
He would probably make his recommendation.
But the decision would not be with the New York company, however.
Not necessarily.
Is it customarily in building the Titanic who decides the matter?
In building the Titanic, I could not tell you exactly how it was decided, but it was led up to in this way. Mr. Ismay, no doubt, consulted with various directors, and it was decided that it would be desirable to follow out his recommendations and construct 2 steamers, the Olympic and the Titanic. That met with the approval of the Board of Directors.
The action was taken by the Board of Directors in New York?
They, in confirming Mr. Ismay's action, did that, yes, sir.
They vitalized the action or recommendation?
They confirmed his action.
He could not have taken the action but for their authority, could he? He would not have done so, as a matter of fact.
I do not think he would have done so.
No. Was there any direction or request sent from the management or anything connected with the International Mercantile Marine or any of the subsidiary companies to try to make a speed record on the Titanic?
Not the slightest, and never would be in the first voyage. She never would be pressed.
From the experience incident to the Titanic disaster, have you or your associates come to any conclusion as to laws, policies, or regulations which, if internationally adopted, would minimize the possibility of repetition of such a catastrophe?
I think the fairest way for me to answer that question is this. Since the accident to the Titanic, we have been absolutely overwhelmed, first in distress matters, to do everything that we could for everybody, and the only precaution or action that we have taken is that Mr. Ismay authorized last Friday and instructed the managers abroad to immediately equip all of the IMM Company steamers with lifeboats and life rafts enough to carry every passenger and every member of the crew. Further than that, we have not gone.
Those new instructions were based upon your conclusions, I assume, that it was impossible to make a non-sinkable ship.
Based upon a conclusion that nobody ever for one moment realized that an accident of this kind could have happened. There was nothing further from the minds of everybody than an accident of this kind could take place. We never thought, until we got Captain Haddock's message in the first place, that the ship could go down, and in the next place, that there would be any material loss of life. This has demonstrated an entirely new proposition that had to be dealt with, something that nobody has ever thought of before. These steamers were considered tremendous lifeboats in themselves. This vessel was constructed as only 3 other ships have been constructed, and they are all owned by the White Star Line.
Have you come to any conclusion in your own mind that any individual was responsible in any direction or in any manner for this catastrophe?
I do not see how you could blame anybody. You have the best commander, you have everybody aboard that was interested in the ship. There is no reason to feel that every precaution would not have been taken. You had no instructions to force the ship, you had nothing for which you can blame yourself at all.
You say the Titanic cost complete £1.5 million in round numbers. What was she insured for?
She was insured for, in round numbers, £1 million, the balance being carried by the IMM companies under our own underwriting scheme.
You say Harland and Wolff builds your ships on a percentage basis. They construct plans and submit them to you, and you determine, and then your representatives, I presume, oversee the construction of the ship, and they get an added percentage of the cost. So it is to their advantage to make the ship, from a dollar standpoint, cost as much as possible, is it not?
Right, sir. When you say that I do this, you mean, of course, that the company, in its ramifications, does this. The owner of the ship does this, the Owen Company.
Yes.
There is every reason why Harland and Wolff would be very glad to put anything under heaven on the ship, because the more they put on it, the more they would make.
What percentage is it customary for Harland and Wolff to receive on the cost?
I think it is 5%. It is covered by an agreement.
Have you any knowledge as to whether precautionary measures were taken by the officers of the ship after word was received of the vicinity of icebergs and ice floes?
I have no doubt of that, because of what we have gotten from the testimonies before you. As I say, I have not had any talk about the matter with any of the officers and men. I have not had any conversation with them about the matter.
Have you or your associates come to any conclusion as to the improvements that can be made in legislation that would minimize the possibility of the repetition of a catastrophe of this nature?
No, sir, because as I have just said, we have had no time to thoroughly discuss that.
You have not had time?
We have not had the time to do it. We can only say this, that everything we have is open, and we will give you every assistance that we possibly can in every way. If there are any suggestions that we can make, or any matters in regard to which you desire our opinion, or anything of that kind, we will get our experts to give it to you. We are not experts ourselves. That is what I would like to have you understand.
The only deduction you have made is that it is impossible to build a non-sinkable ship.
Well, it looks so today from this experience. If you had asked me that a week ago, I would have said no. I would have said that we had them.
You gave the minimum cost of the first, second, and third class passenger on the Titanic. And what are the maximum costs?
That would run up to anything. It depends entirely on the circumstances and conditions.
It depends upon the furnishings of the rooms, I suppose.
A man might want a room and a bath and a sitting room for himself and his servant. Another man might come along and say, I want these 2 rooms and a bath and a sitting room, and I want to put 5 people in them or 4 people in them. Each of the rooms has 2 single beds in it. It is entirely a question of what taste each person has, and what his requirements are, and what accommodations they want in way of space.
And the length of purse would also be a factor. On that point, you have cabled your London office any directions regarding the crew?
You asked me on Saturday night to get for you the name and address of every man going home to the Lapland.
Yes.
I told the manager of our steamship department yesterday morning there to assure himself that he had that and would send it down, or to cable it over so that it would be gotten before the ship gets there. Is that what you were driving at, Senator?
That is what I want in record. I would also like the statement in the record of your offer to furnish for this committee any surviving officer, any officer or member of the crew whom we may desire to examine.
We assure you that we will give you all the information you desire, and we will see that anybody under our control that you desire to appear before you, so does appear.
That is my understanding.
If that is not as strong as you want it...
This is a voluntary offer on the part of the company.
We made that offer to Senator Smith the moment we saw him at the gangplank of the Carpathia. To the best of my knowledge and belief, I told you that we would cooperate with you in every way and be very glad to have anybody you wanted appear before you.
Then there has been no attempt by your company or any officer or subordinate in your company to spirit away any member of the crew or any surviving officer of the Titanic?
To the best of my knowledge and belief, no.
I think you had better put into the record your motive in wanting to get these men out of the country.
Men arriving under these extraordinary circumstances, not being on articles, are very difficult at times to control, because a great many people are running after them for stories and making them presents and taking them out in the street. They stray away, they get into endless trouble, and they are not controllable as are seamen and firemen ordinarily from a ship when it is in the dock under the command of an officer and everything of that sort. It is the duty of every owner or representative of an owner of a steamship under similar circumstances to get those men out of those temptations and to get them away to their own homes and their own people where they can go back again and sign on another ship and go to sea.
Is that the sole motive that you had in wanting to get them out of the country?
That is the only motive I had. I never thought about anything else.
In a case like that, if you have a sister ship or a ship of the same company, it is used as the home of your employees and the method of transporting them to their homes?
Yes, as quickly as we can get them back.
That is the custom?
Yes. If we have a steamer coming in from the Mediterranean and we do not need the crew, we send them on somebody else's line or get them to Boston. We get them away. We do not want to have them a minute longer than we have to.
So far as you know, are these men who are survivors of the Titanic to be reemployed by your company?
They will certainly be reemployed if they appear for service.
Are they still in your service?
No, sir. Technically speaking, they are not, for the reason that the moment a ship goes down, the men's wages cease. But we, of course, take care of them.
You said that as soon as the ship went down, the wages of the men ceased, but that you took care of them? Is there not an English law that gives them a remedy and provides for the payment of so much a week under such circumstances?
I am not clear on that without looking it up. We have to return them, and we do all these things. They would have to go on the British consul in regard to that. I could not give you all the ramifications on that. The articles end when the ship goes down.
Mr. Franklin, the Titanic was divided into 15 compartments by transverse partitions, as I understand it.
Right.
Is there any way of telling how many of those different watertight compartments were opened up by this collision? Or what is your best estimate if there is no way of telling?
I do not think there's any way of telling from anything that I have heard. You may find in examining the officers you might get some information on that subject, but I doubt if you will. And as far as I am concerned, I do not think you can estimate. I think, it might be a guess, 5 or 6.
That is your best estimate?
We can show you the general plan of the Olympic, which would show you those compartments.
Mr. Franklin, you were quoted in the paper of the afternoon of Monday as saying that there was a sufficient number of lifeboats on the Titanic to take away all the passengers and crew on board. Did you make any such statement as that?
I do not remember making any statement of that kind, because I do not think anybody thought there were enough lifeboats to move the entire ship's company, passengers, and crew at the same time to accommodate them all. Here are the various compartments. Here is a plan of the steamer, showing the various compartments. How many of those were damaged and how many were admitting water immediately, it is impossible for me to give you the slightest information. Anything I might say to you would simply be a guess.
And when was the International Mercantile Marine Company organized?
In 1902, sir.
A foreign corporation?
The International Mercantile Marine Company is a New Jersey corporation.
You've held the position of vice president, then, since it was organized?
Not immediately. My recollection is about 6 or 7 months after the organization was completed.
Prior to that time, were you connected with any shipping interests?
I was connected with the Atlantic Transport Line, which is a subsidiary company of the International Mercantile Marine Company.
Your position is the highest office in that company in America?
In America, yes, sir.
Mr. Ismay's official relation is what?
He is the president of that company.
He is managing director also of the White Star Line?
Of the Oceanic Steam Navigation Company, which is the White Star Line.
This position of managing director is one which rather combines both the duties of a president and also a general manager of a corporation, does it not?
Yes, sir. He is the head of a particular corporation, absolutely.
So that he was the highest official of that corporation on board the Titanic at the time that she went down.
Right, sir.
Do you know when it was intended to have the Titanic arrive at New York?
I had not the slightest idea. I never had any advices on when the Titanic was expected to arrive in New York.
Your office had no communication then with respect to the time it was expected the Titanic would arrive?
No, sir.
You heard nothing either from Belfast or from Southampton?
From nobody.
Do you know whether or not the Titanic reported from time to time during the progress of the voyage to Southampton or Belfast?
That I could not tell you. I would have no knowledge of that whatsoever.
Would that be customary?
She might report for the first day out to Southampton or Liverpool, just where she was, as a matter of form.
Do you know whether the Olympic, for instance, reports on such a voyage as that?
As a rule, the steamers do not report except as they are arriving. After they have left port, as a rule, they do not make any further reports. It is only with a view of being able to advise the friends of passengers and so forth regarding the meeting of the ship that is done.
Do you know why the communication that was sent into Camp Race was sent there rather than direct to your office in New York?
For a long time, these communications have been sent to the telegraph companies themselves with a view of that being the quickest way to send that information throughout to those who are interested and report it to the papers and to the maritime exchanges and so forth. A little later on, frequently we get information, so when the ship approaches Nantucket, for the sake of argument, or Siaskanet, we might get them a telegram ourselves from the captain saying he is in such and such position and expects to arrive at Sandy Hook at such and such time, so that we can make arrangements for receiving them at the dock and notify friends of the passengers. It is a pure matter of form. It is routine business.
As I understand, about 20 minutes before 2 on Monday morning, the reporter rang you up and said that they had heard the Titanic was sinking, and this came through the steamship Virginian, that information?
That was reported to me at that time.
Via Montreal?
So it was reported to me.
Can you recall how long it was after that before you had confirmation of the report?
As I say, I immediately got to the dock. Then I at once got to the Associated Press, who confirmed the report. Then I got Montreal on the telephone, and I would say in about an hour, or probably 3/4 of an hour, they confirmed that the information was correct over the telephone.
What line did the Olympic belong to?
The Olympic belonged to the White Star Line.
And the Virginian?
The Virginian belongs to the Allen Line.
That is a competing line?
That is a competing line. But when I say a competing line, all transatlantic lines are more or less competing. But it is a line running between Canada and England as a general proposition. So some steamers go to Boston.
And the Baltic?
The Baltic is a steamer owned by the White Star Line, the same line. The Baltic was bound east and had passed the scene of the disaster.
The home office of the White Star Line is here?
In Liverpool.
The Titanic was registered where?
I think she was registered in Liverpool.
Mr. Franklin, how did the speed of the Titanic compare with that of the Lusitania or the Mauretania?
The speed of the Titanic, as I understand she was running, was between 3 and 4 miles less than the speed of the Mauretania and the Lusitania.
Less than the maximum speed?
Less than some of their average voyages, I am taking it. And it was never thought by anybody that the Titanic would anything equal the speed of the Mauretania and the Lusitania. It was never expected by anyone.
She had not been put up to her maximum speed on this occasion?
My understanding is that she had never been run at her maximum speed.
What is the customary speed of these fast steamers in going through fog?
That is entirely under the control and the jurisdiction of the captain, and it is one man's opinion against another man's. It is what the captain of the steamer at the time thinks is a prudent speed, considering the density of the fog and so forth, and anything else he has to govern him.
No rules regarding these matters are laid down by the steamship companies?
Yes, the steamship companies have very stringent rules. I think the fairest thing is to read off the White Star rule covering just that sort of a point.
Do you have rules covering the question of ice as well as fog?
It covers everything that the commander thinks is in any way hazardous. It is a general rule.
Read the rule.
It is Rule 101. Mr. Burlingham says, "Commanders must distinctly understand that the issue of these regulations does not in any way relieve them from the responsibility for the safe and efficient navigation of their respective vessels. And they are also enjoined to remember that they must run no risk which might by any possibility result in an accident to their ship. It is to be hoped that they will ever bear in mind that the safety of the lives and property entrusted to their care is the ruling principle that should govern them in the navigation of their vessels, and that no supposed gaining of expedition or saving of time on the voyage is to be purchased at the risk of accidents. The company desires to maintain for its vessels a reputation for safety and only looks for such speed on the various voyages as is consistent with safe and prudent navigation. Commanders are reminded that the steamers are to a great extent uninsured and that their only livelihood, as well as the company's, depends upon immunity from an accident. No precaution which ensures safe navigation is to be considered excessive. Adding to that, I would like to say that I do not believe that there is any company crossing the Atlantic that carries such a large proportion of its own insurance as the subsidiary companies of the International Mercantile Marine Company produced.
The dangers that are to be encountered are the dangers of collision and the dangers of icebergs?
Yes, the danger of collision and the danger of icebergs.
The danger of icebergs, of course, is the more infrequent condition?
The more infrequent, and of course it is difficult to say about that because you may have a sailing vessel or something of that kind crossing the track.
This morning you spoke of the firm of Ismay and Imrie. Do you know what firm that is?
It was the managing firm of the White Star Line, and when the business of the White Star Line was purchased, the business of Messrs. Ismay and Imrie as managers were also included in the purchase. And now you might call it a trade name as much as anything else. It is an empty shell as it stands today.
There is no corporate organization?
I don't think so. I think it is a firm, a co-partnership.
What was their business?
They were the agents and managers of the White Star Line.
Was the White Star Line ever a corporation, or has it always been just a name, a designation?
The White Star Line might be compared in that respect to the Pennsylvania Railroad. The Pennsylvania Railroad is nothing but a trade name.
And the White Star was only a trade name?
A trade name, yes.
You made some mention of the eastward track and the westward track for ships going east and west.
I did.
What is the width in miles of the tracks?
The distance apart?
Yes.
I think it is about 60 miles.
60 miles is allowed as the width of each track?
The tracks are 60 miles apart, and you are supposed to stay on the track.
That is under agreement between the different companies?
That was a matter that was submitted to all the experts of all the different companies and considered by all the different companies and agreed upon after having taken the very best advice upon the situation that they could.
And the Titanic was in her proper track?
The Titanic was in her proper track, and the captain of the Carpathia testified that the Titanic was in the exact position that she ought to have been on the track.
Do none of the transatlantic liners carry a searchlight?
I've never heard of it.
Do you not think it would be an improvement if they did, in view of the experience that they have?
Well, I do not know. If it was up to me, I would rather get the advice of the technical people. I would rather ask the marine superintendents and the captains. I do not know just where it could be located to advantage. The idea always is not to have the light shining forward, because we have on each ship, as this ship had, 3 officers on the bridge, each one of whom had an officer's certificate and a master's certificate.
They could not pierce the darkness of the fog.
I say you would have to be careful where you should locate such a light so as not to prevent the officers on watch from seeing ahead. That is a matter of investigation, and practical people ought to give you that.
The steamer was going about 21 knots at that time?
All I know about it is what I have heard. I have no information on that at all.
Going at such a speed, have they any evidence as to the time required to stop?
They have that.
In what distance could she be stopped?
Now, I could not tell you that, but the builders could give you all that.
In making your answer to my inquiry this morning regarding the telegraphic and wireless communication between yourself and the officers of your ship and the officers of other ships and the passengers and crews of other ships, did your answer include all cable messages as well as cablegrams and wireless messages?
We did not send any cable messages asking for any information or anything of that kind regarding the position of the ship or anybody on the ship.
Did you send any relating to this matter at all?
Yes, sir.
To whom?
Liverpool. We send them various cables.
And you have copies of them?
Yes, sir. I will put them in as a whole or read them off, whichever you like.
You may file these messages with the reporter unless there's someone which you desire to explain.
There is nothing here that there is anything that we could do to explain. They are only advising them of whatever we had. That is really all they are. You might glance through them and see if anything strikes you.
that will be all at the present time, Mr. Franklin, and you may hold yourself subject to the orders of this committee. Well, that was long, but had a lot of info.
Yeah, it was really meaty. It was starting to get a little bit too, like, history class for me with a lot of the dates and times, and it's really hard to remember and put everything in its perspective. But once we got over some of the reading of the telegraphs, I think it got a lot more interesting. But I do want to say that, of course, they mentioned the president again. I was waiting for that to come up since they were talking about the telegram.
Yeah, and I forgot all about the president, so yep, slipped my mind.
And they're getting a little saucy there, Franklin and Senator Smith. But dates and times.
They expect Franklin to know so much. Like, he's just a member of this.
Yeah, he wasn't
business.
On the ship.
And it's not his personal
and
ship.
It's just,
he wasn't watching it. Like,
yeah, he's at home in bed and got a phone call. But I do think that he contacted Ismay. That my personal belief is that because he said, I don't remember. He used so much of his, like, legalese, too, to the best of my knowledge and belief. But then when he was like, I might have to Liverpool... Maybe. So I feel like he might have tried. He's the vice president. Yeah. Ismay's the president. Yeah. Of course you're going to be like, hey, bud.
And we're talking about Ismay. I think he was in a real hurry to skedaddle on out of there.
Yeah.
Before they had any questionings going on or anything.
Yeah. Because Franklin says he didn't know all the gossip going around, but he had to have some idea.
Might have talked, but we didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
And that they didn't hold the ship for him, but he still was like, well, what are you guys going to do? How are you going to get me out of here?
Change of clothes, please. Also, just an interesting note that Yamsi is Ismay backwards. That's pretty clever.
Wow. Hold on. Whoa. Okay.
And while you absorb that, this is another bit of trivia. I saw a video recently that the third-class passengers all shared one bath. There was one tub. Like in the
For 1,000 people?
In the first class, some of them might have had their own tub, but maybe not every single person.
Well, no wonder bathing didn't happen so often. Yeah.
And then I am so shocked that it's 1912. What are we? 1917? 1912? 1915? Whatever we are. 1912. And... they started this business in 1902, and there's already all this, like, shell corporation, and, that's just a trade name. This is the company, but then that's, how many names did he go through? How confusing is that? And it's just because...
I didn't know they did that back then.
Yeah, because you can't hold anybody account. Yeah, I thought that was a newer thing.
And being such a big company and having so much money that they had subsidies for building the boat, I was like, what?
Yeah, that's a little weaselly, some of that. And then I loved also the rowdy seamen that you want to get them out, because that's, I know that's still an issue when I used to work on, I don't know if I want to say it, but when I used to work on a show, there was the same thing that the fishermen had to get back home immediately or they would cause trouble right after they docked.
That's hysterical. I liked a lot that Franklin was very adamant that there are classifications, but our ships are too good for classifying. They're so above.
Well exceeded.
They could be, but why would you classify them so lowly?
But then he did say something, and I had to go back and reread to make sure I said it correctly, that he said, I don't think anybody thought there was enough lifeboats to carry the passengers and crew.
Because they weren't going to be needed.
That's right, because it's unsinkable. Yeah.
And I think they're trying to figure out which country's laws are going to be followed, is why they're like bouncing us. Like,
that's interesting.
Which company is this? An American company or an English company? Is this from?
True, because they're quite intertwined.
They really are.
And with all these shells, this is a New Jersey company. That's in Liverpool.
So is that so they can say, well, you'll have to check with Great Britain. Yeah. Oh no, you'll have to check with America on that one.
Oh yeah, I wonder when we get into the British inquiries if there's going to be a lot of bounce back of that. Will be that's America's problem.
We have to ask America about that one.
And no pay when the ship goes down?
Yeah, what? Wow, I guess it does give him incentive to keep that ship going. But dang.
Yeah, we take care of them.
Yeah,
we get them home.
We got them back here. We'll probably get them. But no, they don't work for us anymore.
I also recently learned that
ship went down.
Flight attendants, they don't get paid until the plane, the door closes, and then they start. So, like, all those videos that you see of unruly passengers, or, like, when you board a plane and they're helping you and they're lifting your luggage, that is unpaid
paid for that? Get out.
That reminded me of this.
Bye-bye.
Man, if no pay when the ship goes down, I'm sorry. I might not help all these people. I might just hop in a lifeboat.
Yeah.
I'm off the clock.
I'm sorry, off duty.
I'm grabbing a loaf of bread.
That changes my whole perspective of everything.
Especially like for how dedicated that they all still were. Like the guy that was the I forget his name, but who tied the old man's shoes. Helped all his people out. Unpaid labor.
Well, now the ship was still up.
Oh, that's true. Okay, I guess he's paid up to that point. But
so that must be why everybody's so adamant on, well, what time did the ship actually go down?
Oh, that's a good point.
Ooh.
And my last note was just, they really think that they are out there joyriding with the Titanic because they keep asking about the top speed.
Well, I think because that was one of the things that they all wanted to see it do, and because they hit an iceberg, were they going too fast?
Oh, fair enough.
Maybe
they were going too fast to say,
heading with that.
They're out joyriding or something.
They're saying there's ice, and they're going,
all
right, kick it in.
We're going to blast through it, don't worry.
Get another one of those things going, those motors, engines, furnaces, whatever. And I kind of like that Ismay was right away like, all right, let's get lifeboats for everybody on board on all the ships.
Oh, yeah, immediately.
To demonstrate that we didn't know it was going to sink. We didn't know it could sink. But now that we know they can, we're going to fix that immediately.
Yeah, and that's going to,
we are above reproach, just so you know. So that was...
Yeah, this one got wild. It was a little wordy for me with the telegrams, but then it got pretty wild.
Yeah, it had a good payoff at the end. Glad I sat through the beginning so I can be here for the rest. Okay, so that's it for us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. As always, thank you for listening. Please be sure to let us know what you're thinking in the comments or at titanictranscripts@gmail.com. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook page, Titanic Transcripts, for more interesting tidbits and general discussion.